Welcome to the Feria TechCast. We'll bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. Today we're joined by Michael Buckbee, AI search expert, founder, and marketing leader. Michael has worked at the intersection of marketing and technology for nearly 2 decades. Past clients include the US Navy, Fortune 100 companies, YC startups, presidential candidates, federal agencies, rock bands, and foreign governments. Today, he's the co-founder of Nuatoa, a service that tracks brand visibility, ranking, and sentiment within AI search services like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Google Gemini. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Ezekiel. This is really cool.
I'm excited to have you. So, firstly, Michael, tell us about your company, Knowatoa, and the story behind it. I saw you said in your profile that your company started as a joke. So, tell us what you're building at Knowatoa and how it started.
Yeah. I've had a number of different startups over the years and things. And my last one, we were, I was in a group with a bunch of other SaaS founders. And this was some of the earlier days of ChatGPT. And we were kind of like, as a joke, like, oh, hey, let's just go and put our company name in and see what it has to say. And the information was wrong. A lot of it was bad. And it was, laughable, just like what it came up with, like who our competitors are, what it is we do, it just wasn't right. And I didn't think too much of it, but it started to just like sort of itch inside my brain of like, I wonder if there's a better way to look at this. And so I wrote a little script, like literally a one file script that ran on my Mac that hit OpenAI's API and just like got the answers to a couple of these questions and dumped it to a CSV. And so I ran this for myself and for a couple other SaaS founders. And just sort of that was it. And then like a week or two later, a few of them started to like hit me up and be like, Mike, we have a post-purchase survey that says like, hey, how'd you find out about us? And we keep getting people that say they found us on ChatGPT. And hey, is there any way you could update that spreadsheet and send me a new one? And I'm like, all right. And that was the very beginning of Noatoa. And since then, we have this very automated system that does, tracking across all the different AI services and lots of other stuff. But, it really did sort of start as this jokey conversation about like, oh, let's just, as a lark, throw our names into ChatGPT. So.
That's great. So, why is AI search already a big deal for businesses right now?
Even a year ago, I would have said like, oh, AI search is coming. But like right now, even if you pretend like ChatGPT doesn't exist or anybody but Google has really gone all in on AI search. And it's the first like real interface change we've seen. There was a company that, got a lot of funding off the promise of like, hey, your kids are not going to know what a search results page is. They are not going to go to a separate search engine thing. They're not going to type in some phrase, get a list of links, and then choose from those links and go through stuff. They're just going to ask an AI and it's going to answer for you. And if you look at like what Google is delivering on right now with like AI overviews, you type in something and yeah, there's still some results sprinkled around the page. But for the majority of the questions people ask of Google, it gives you an AI overview. And now they're moving even further past that with their AI mode and deep research and all these other tools where it's really like you interacting with a bot that's Googling. So it's Googling for you. And that's just a whole new world for marketers, for people doing research, for all sorts of different aspects of things.
Interesting. So, what was the moment you realized that your simple script for checking AI rankings could be a real business?
I think, people that are software developers are really into this, into AI assisted dev tools. And like, it's a big fight right now. Like, hey, vibe coders and people doing all this different stuff. But I think unlike a lot of some of the past um, you know, waves of hype, I think there really is something to AI. And just in my own personal use, I saw the number of Google searches I did every day for software development just absolutely plummet. And that was because I started using ChatGPT. And, instead of just, um, you know, I'm sure you've done this as well, which, you're having some problem, maybe with code, maybe writing something, and now I need to Google it. So you do this whole mental exercise of like, all right, so now I have to abstract out what is actually happening. I don't write like, hey, I'm trying to loop over this company names and I take each name and I send it to this thing and I do this stuff. You write like, how do I write a JavaScript loop? And then like, oh, it's a while loop and this other thing. And so you do this whole like contextualizing and decontextualizing questions to try to get it to happen. And with AI, it just does that for you. Like you just paste the actual bit of code there. You don't have to do that. Or even, you're using a tool where it's just built in. And that is such, I think terms overused, but paradigm shift. That's just such a different way of interaction. That's a huge leap forward. And, to see that, firsthand and to, hear that, I think it just makes a world of difference in your own motivation. So.
That is awesome. So, tell us, why do you say ChatGPT seem to hate some big companies?
you know, it's there's always a risk of, humanizing the AI services too much. And it's not so much that, ChatGPT set out or OpenAI or Sam Altman set out to be like, yeah, we're not going to like, Wells Fargo Bank is usually the example I give. But it's that, the how these systems are trained is off massive amounts of internet knowledge. And there's a whole separate debate about, the ethics of that and how it works. But the general sentiment of all of that comes into play in a way it doesn't in traditional search. So I bring up Wells Fargo because they were the recipient of the largest Federal Trade Commission fine of all time for doing all this financial fraud, from like you apply for a bank account and they sign you up for like 6 credit cards and destroy your credit, like all of these issues they had. And at this point, that was years ago, but the internet has a long memory. And if you ask like, hey, should I use Wells Fargo or should I use my local credit union or some other bank? It will remember and it will say like, hey, maybe you should do an ethics investigation of Wells Fargo before you open that checking account. And that is just a real different world than if you type in Wells Fargo to Google, where you get like, hey, well, the nearest Wells Fargo ATM's around the corner. Here's how you log in. Here's how you do this other stuff. And that sort of sentiment and that way that knowledge is used and presented is something I think we just have to take into account now if we're trying to be found.
Wonderful. So, what are the simple steps that a tech founder can take to make sure they show up better in AI searches?
Sure. So I think there's a couple things, and there's a little bit of like technical SEO stuff. And then I think there's another set that is more in terms of like content strategy and business strategy. And so the technical one is pretty easy, which is that you need to just make sure that you aren't blocking most of these bots that are trying to interact with your site. And I think there's still a lot of people that are very concerned about like scraping, and you hear a lot of this in the news. And I think most of those discussions don't do a good job of differentiating, hey, I have a SaaS business, I'm trying to find customers, I have a marketing site, versus something like CNN or Reuters news agency or something else that's a publisher. And there's very different incentives. As a marketer, as someone who's a SaaS founder, I want as many eyeballs to find me as possible. I want all these bots to come through my site and read it. And there's a lot of ways to accidentally block those. And if you do block them, you end up in like some real weird spots. Like even again, just strictly for Google, Google has a standard Google bot that everybody lets index their site because it reads your site. Then you show up in Google when people search. It's great. Now there's a Google extended bot. And that is the one that is used for AI mode, that's used for deep research. And if you are blocking that on accident, because it's not strictly the Google bot, then you're going to have some real issues showing up in those different things. And there's a very complicated ecosystem underpinning this with like other services that feed into AI databases and things. But uh, that's, the core of it is don't block those. At Knowatoa.com, we have a free tool that lets you like check more or less if all the different bots can get to your site. It's a good first start. And I think the second part was sort of around like, well, what should you do as far as content, as far as information? In general, the old SEO strategy was, hey, let's write informational stuff. Let's write, almost like a Wikipedia article about our companies, the area we are in, and put it up on our site. And hopefully we'll get some, Google traffic from that. And now we're seeing a real shift towards like, that's not going to play. That's not going to work. And those answers are just going to be provided directly from the LLM or from the AI service. And so what's really important is that you rank for the competitive searches, that if someone looks like, hey, what's the best XYZ? Who is a good provider of, a service in an area, like those kind of questions, that you show up and, you're above your competitors. And those are very bottom of the funnel questions. And then also a lot of business knowledge questions, which is like, hey, do you operate in this country? Like, and do you, have certifications for this? Do you have, these certain features that haven't traditionally been thought of as like an SEO, as a marketing responsibility, but conveying those sort of business information, business knowledge things is now, I think, a key part of, the content strategy for companies going forward.
Wonderful. So what's one surprising thing that a company has actually discovered by using Nuatoa?
Sure. We had a really big company discover they were accidentally using Cloudflare. They were using Cloudflare. They knew that, but they didn't realize it was blocking like a tremendous number of these bots. That's something that people find out. A lot of times, people find out that there's some, wrapping back. I think a surprising thing is the hallucinations. So, I mean, hallucinations are just a problem with AI services in general. And there's really sort of two sets of them. And so the one is information gaps. The AI just doesn't know. And so it sort of makes up, what it is. And the second is sort of logic. And the logic ones, we as, people that aren't developing the actual AI models can't really deal with. But the knowledge ones are very easy to deal with. So if it is a situation where like, you're a lawyer that specializes in, divorce law or something in Chicago, but it thinks, you sell fruit down by the highway or has like some crazy, separate idea about your company. Those are things that you can actually work on. Or, all sorts of, much more detailed business things is typically what we see as being just really wrong and often really weird ways. So.
So what are some of the major mistakes that you see people make when they think about SEO and AI?
I think one of the biggest mistakes is that there's a thought of we can just keep doing what we have been doing. And I think, for better or worse, this is an exciting time that, there's real changes in, individual user behavior. There's real changes in how these different services present information and rank it and what they think is important. And as someone who's been around for a while and done this, that's very exciting because we were sort of stuck in a rut for like a decade of like, everyone's like over optimizing for Google, trying to write a certain way. And I'm very excited to see what comes just because I think this is a chance for people to take a new approach to stuff.
So say I own a tech company. So
Mhm.
how do I, as a founder, track what an AI like ChatGPT or Gemini thinks about my company? Is it like a regular Google search?
Yeah. I mean, something we have on the site that's not even, there's no paywall or anything, is a Biscuit framework, which stands for a whole bunch of different little things you can do. But part of it is just a manual like, hey, just literally ask ChatGPT, what do you think of my company? Is my company a good company? Is it good to work for? Are we good for our customers? Do we treat our employees well? Do we offer good value for money? Any questions like that. Those are all great indicators of, sort of where you stand right now. What I think gets tricky is, how do you track those 10 questions week over week? And how do you track those over all these different services? And that, fracturing of search away from Google to all these other surfaces is something that, you need automation for. And I think that's where we really help.
That is wonderful. So I'd like to ask, is being a developer a superpower for marketing?
I have always thought it was. And I think, the new AI tools now make it so much easier. They've just lowered the barrier to, letting anyone do developer type tasks where, so much of, being a good marketer, being a good, person is trying to be very empathetic with your users. And a lot of times that means getting data of like, what do they actually like? What are they actually doing? And dealing with all that data and dealing with all the different systems that you need in order to, produce and communicate and do all these things at scale is just much, much easier if you're a developer, or at least you have, a little bit of ChatGPT to help you out with different things. So.
That is wonderful. So tell us, Michael, what's a common mistake that companies make them invisible to AI searches?
I think we've already talked about sort of the technical one, but I do think you need to really think about your users and their intent and what they're searching for, and then write content that, fits that search and fits that, the intent. Let me say that better. that fits the, not just like what they're searching for, but what your users are actually trying to accomplish. And I think too often, content writing and business content writing is sort of stopped at that top level and not seen it all the way through. And so, a lot of times maybe that's not just providing, an article, but it's providing a tool alongside that, or it's providing a guide or some other information to help, bring people further along. So.
That is wonderful. So what do you think is the future for people who work in SEO and search marketing?
I had mentioned before that I think search is fracturing, but it really seems like it is, where, for the longest time, Google was, high 90% of all the search traffic. And, if you actually look at like what people are doing when they're like trying to make decisions, what are people doing for, lots of things outside of strictly a search, it is amazing how much traffic and how much use people are getting out of these AI systems. And it's really transformative. And just like trying to manage and wrangle all these different systems, I think is just work for SEOs and marketers for a long, long time. So I think overall, I'm very positive about the changes for AI.
That is interesting. So I have another question.
Sure.
Now tell us, Michael, what does a brand actually mean in a traditional versus AI search?
Sure. So in traditional search, brand really meant just like a name, just like a company name and reputation. And I think we're seeing a real shift in content to where, internally we describe this as like face versus faceless content. And so, part of the reason I'm very interested in doing podcasts like this, is because it is very much face content where it is, my face, my words going out there. And there's a real thought that if it's faceless content, if it's non-brand content that doesn't have a point of view, that's just information, that it's at very high risk of just being, sucked into the AI systems. And, there's no attribution to you. There's no, usefulness to it. And I think it used to be the case you could, skate by with that sort of scenario. But now, in terms of, having a real presence online, having, a very effective marketing system, I think you just have to have, face content and branded human, aspects to that. So.
Wonderful. So I'll ask this question for the developers listening. So, what's a big technical challenge you faced in building Nuatoa?
Um, it's interesting that, one of the things we're doing is really doing AI calls at scale. And, you know, and the jankiness and brokenness of almost all of the AI providers' APIs was just a massive challenge for us to overcome, where, we're doing millions of, requests to these different AI systems, and they start to break down. They don't respond rapidly. And there's just lots of issues with that. And so I think that was a real surprising thing. Was we built our own, sort of data plane that does nothing but, interact and work with these different systems at scale. And, I think that was a real innovation, and that was much harder than I thought it was going to be, mostly because I think I just presumed all these systems would, you make an API call, you get a response like, oh, we're good. No, it's like, make an API call. Maybe it responds. Maybe it returns half a response, all these types of issues. So just a word of warning to anyone who's trying to build, production AI systems. So.
That is amazing. So, tell us, what's your best advice for someone who's just getting their first 100 users on a new tech tool that they're building?
Sure. I mean, I think it sounds trite, but, I think there is great value in talking to users. And I think more than just like, I hear that a lot, but something we have found really illuminating is to do sessions where we get on a call, just kind of like this, and say like, hey, would you mind just like going through our onboarding flow, and we'll just watch the screen. We won't ask you any questions. We'll just please talk aloud as you're going through and just let us know what you think about the different elements. And doing even just like 2 or 3 of those is, it's very humbling. You find like, oh, all these assumptions you made about how easy things are and how straightforward, none of it's the case. And I've just seen like massive improvements based upon even just, again, a handful of calls. So that's my advice, is to, do onboarding recording sessions with people. So.
That's great. So, finally, Michael, tell us, what does innovation mean to you, and how does it relate to your field and your work with building Noatoa?
Um, so I live on the East Coast of Virginia, and it's very close to the Outer Banks where the Wright brothers had their first flight. And there's an incredible museum they have there where you can actually stand and see like, hey, here's how far the first, plane actually went and flew, and all the different steps. And that's what I've always gotten out of like textbooks, and like, oh yeah, that's what happened. What they don't tell you, and what the museum does a great job of conveying, is the years of struggle and turmoil and iteration after iteration after iteration of, you know, planes that the Wright brothers built in collection with the whole community that was there, literally like borrowing sewing machines from people, literally getting people to help like to ship their stuff out there because it wasn't even a bridge at the time. Like, it was just this massive effort. And I don't think anything I'm doing compares at any level to what the Wright brothers are doing with respect to innovation. But I do think there is something very human and really like sort of core to humans about that struggle, and about like trying to fix things, about doing multiple iterations of it and working together with other people to do that. So those are the two things I care the most about. So
That's wonderful. So tell us, where can listeners contact you or try out your tool, Nuatoa, for themselves?
sure, I recommend people go to Knowatoa.com and you know it's KNOWATOA.com. And you can put your site in and we'll generate a little sample report for you based on real data. Take a look. They can also email me, mike@noatoa.com. I'm certainly on LinkedIn and some other systems, but hard at work building stuff, so I don't spend a lot of time there. It's probably better to email me. So
Great. So, Michael, it's been a really wonderful conversation with you today, and I'm really excited to have you on the show. And also, I'll add links to where users can contact you and try out your tool on the show notes and description when I publish this podcast.
all right, thank you so much. So